I've got 6 under-the-radar anime that you might be missing out on for spring of 2024, along with a few others that could be for you. Now, I'm not going to put any sequels or big-name franchises on this list. Everything that's on here had to have fewer than 100,000 views on Mall in order to make the cut. That's why you're not going to see Windbreaker, for example. Let's get to the first one. Jellyfish Can't Swim in the Night. The story of the show is actually pretty standard stuff, despite the creative title. The idea is that jellyfish can't swim by themselves and have to be carried along by the ocean current. Likewise, the adolescent girls in the show are struggling to open up into who they really are and need each other's help to realize their potential and gain the courage to express themselves musically or artistically. Visually, this show is drop-dead gorgeous. This is some of the best artwork and animation that I've seen in a television series. Jellyfish will have some occasional weird hiccups that take me out of the flow, like some really leering fan service shots that feel totally out of place. There's not a lot of them, but they're in there. And my favorite odd moment might be something that just hits me and no one else, but there's a point where Kano is talking about how she used to be a pop idol and says, "That was a long time ago." No, it's not. Not unless you're an idol when you were 8 years old. We find out later why she stopped being a pop idol, and it was something that happened 2 years ago. I've got bottles of ketchup in my fridge that are older than that. That's partly because I don't eat a lot of ketchup, but still, 2 years, that's not a long time ago. This is a really well-made show, but there's also a lot of teenage angst and wondering, who am I? Who do I want to be? Okay, see, I found it. 2 years, that's not very long. This thing's probably not even expired yet. December of 2022. Ugh, that's not good. That's 2 years ago. I thought the dialogue was actually quite well written, but I might be a little tired of watching high school anime girls discover who they are through the power of friendship. However, Jellyfish is good enough to overcome some of that resistance. If you're in the mood for watching people build their own community to find acceptance, then this is one of the best examples in recent years, along with Bocchi. And if you just want to see some fantastic art and animation, then this is one of the best shows of the season. Train to the End of the World. This anime is just plain weird and fun, and I love weird stuff, so I'm totally going to board this train. In the opening scene, we see the introduction of a new technology that goes a bit haywire and completely changes the entire world. I'm pretty sure it's the entire world, maybe it's just Japan. Anyway, people start turning into talking animals as soon as they turn 20. These teenage girls living in a small village want to go looking for their missing friend, so when one of them learns how to operate a train and gets a lead on the missing girl's location, they all set off into the heart of a very bizarre version of Japan. If you're going to watch this show, it's probably going to be for the weirdness. The main cast is fine as a group. They've got just enough personality to make things fun, though not necessarily enough to carry a whole show in a less interesting world. The production values are also quite good, but not spectacular enough to merit a watch on their own, like Jellyfish. But if you take an imaginative world that can surprise you at every turn, and combine that with decent production values and decent character writing, then you have a really enjoyable show, and that's what Train has been so far. I love how the world around these girls can change at any moment, so the show's not a repetitive pattern of stop for a while to meet a quirky character, then move on for a bit, and then stop again for the next quirky character. Instead, the strangeness of the show can come from all angles. Even the directions they're able to travel on the train can change, and that sense of everything around the girls being able to change, or to present some weird new face, makes the show feel more like a dream. Things have been getting stranger as the show goes on, so I'm pretty excited to see where it goes from here. Unnamed Memory. Lots of anime have memorable titles that help them stand out, but I forgot what this show was called even while I was writing the script. Unnamed Memory is just not a very memorable title, at least not for me. And that's a shame, because I think that title is part of what is holding this anime back from being viewed by more people. Unnamed Memory is about a prince named Oscar who's been cursed by a witch to never have children. It's his father's curse, but he's got it too. Oscar needs to sire an heir, so he climbs the Tower of the Azure Witch because she's supposed to grant the wish of whoever's able to make it to the top. Since Oscar's basically Superman, he makes it to the top with ease and asks Tinashe the witch to marry him on the spot so that she can start popping out a baby or two to keep his family line going. Tinashe instantly refuses, but she tries her best to come up with different solutions to the prince's problems, partly to preserve her witchly honor and partly to avoid having to marry him. It also seems as though she knew his great-grandfather pretty well, and maybe even had a romantic connection to him, which went unfulfilled. Either way, there's more to Oscar's curse and Tinashe's involvement with his family than meets the eye, and we will quickly see that the witch is involved with different magical factions who want to control the kingdom. I enjoy series that have interesting ideas in its world building or in the premise because it gives me something to think about during the slower parts of the show. My mind might wander to start thinking about how different are these witches as a species from us, Where do they come from, and what are the other witches like? And then I'm drawn back into the show as a dramatic scene or an important reveal pops up. Another thing that I liked about this show is that it's kind of a loveless romance, at least at first. Everything these characters do is for a practical purpose. Sometimes Oscar would say something that sounds romantic, like how he just wants Tanasha to marry him, but the only reason he wants this is so that he can have an heir. It seems pretty clear that Tanasha is going to fall for the prince, but how are they going to overcome some of the difficulties of that union, only one of which is the prince's curse? The opening episode is fun from a world-building standpoint, though the characters themselves feel fairly one-note most of the time. This seems to be a show that has trouble with the character development, which is usually one of my most important requirements for a good anime, but the setting and plot are interesting enough for me to keep watching so far. Thankfully, episodes 2 and 3 have a lot more action and more interesting plot points than the first episode, so I hope they can keep this up. A Salad Bowl of Eccentrics. This is a show where hearing a review like this can really help out when deciding whether to give it a go or not, because the first episode is not going to give you a full impression of what the show is like. A Salad Bowl of Eccentrics features Sarada Odin and Livia de Udis, a princess and her loyal knight, who have to use magic to flee to Japan in order to escape a rebellion in their native land. There they eventually run into Sosuke, a struggling private detective who mostly deals with infidelity cases. That detective motif shows up in a lot of different places because Sarah becomes obsessed with Detective Conan, aka Case Closed, one of the most popular manga and anime properties in Japan. At times you even see her reading the manga with its actual title and artwork. There's nothing that's spelled slightly different like Detective Bonin or Case Open. This show will just geek out directly about Detective Conan, even though the plot of this series actually follows a different anime much more closely. At first, this show feels exactly like Hinamatsuri, which was one of the better anime from 2018. In both shows, you have parallel storylines where two visitors show up from another world. The younger one teams up with an adult male with a somewhat shady job, and the older visitor is taken in by Japan's homeless community. Because Japan is a foreign world to these visitors, they often react with wonder to the little conveniences that we take for granted. That's a lot for two shows to share in common. But by episode 2, Salad Bowl is definitely not Hinamatsuri anymore. This anime is going for a much wackier, humorous vibe, and it's not afraid to use sex as a source of humor. I mean, it will literally use a couple having sex against a plate glass window as one of the jokes. Everything's blurred out, but this anime is definitely not for people who are uncomfortable with sexual humor. If you don't mind ecchi humor, then this one has some pretty crazy moments, and I do want to see if they keep developing Livia's relationship with the homeless community, since that was one of the strong points of Hinamatsuri. Although I will say that of all the shows on this list, this one's probably the one with the best odds to drop off in the later episodes. But for now, I still want to see what kind of eccentric characters show up next. The Many Sides of Voice Actor Radio. The Many Sides of Voice Actor Radio is about two voice actresses, Yuhi and Yasumi, who are still in high school. They get put together for a radio show when a producer learns that they're both in the same class at the same school. The problem is, they've met each other before and it did not go well. Yuhi is an introverted and shy person in real life whose main method of coping is to lash out negatively whenever a social interaction is forced upon her. However, she's also a skilled and talented professional who can turn into a near-perfect entertainment idol with the flip of a switch. Yasumi is a much more outgoing person who's quickly made more friends in the industry. Though her career hasn't been going as well as Yuhi, Yasumi is also a talented professional whose untapped potential is starting to blossom, even if she doesn't always realize how good she is yet. They're polar opposites when they're not performing, but because of their professionalism, they're able to make their radio show a success. I liked how Yuhi's sense of honor does not allow her to lie on the show. If one of them says something like, "Let's head to an ice cream shop after school," then they have to go to an ice cream shop. And Yuhi will drag Yasumi along with her whether either of them like it or not, which they won't. Without saying too much, I was a little surprised at how quickly Yuhi's attitude started to change. Most of the main story seems to be about Yuhi learning how to interact positively with other people, even though Yasumi is our viewpoint character for the series. That change is a good thing though, because I thought Yuhi was pretty unpleasant in the first episode, and I started to warm up to her more in the second. I thought this show might be like Seiyu's life at first, where you get more of a behind-the-scenes look at voice acting, but this show has a much different vibe. You do get a behind-the-scenes look at performing, but unlike Seiyu's life, it usually doesn't explain much of what you're seeing. This show is more about the story between the main characters and less about educating the viewer on what it's like to work in a recording studio. If you enjoy idol shows like Love Live, but you want to see the girls be more realistic in their downtime and not brimming with optimistic happiness all the time, then The Many Sides of Voice Actor Radio might be worth a look. Before I reveal my favorite underrated anime of the season, I want to quickly mention a few shows that aren't really my thing, but maybe you'll like them. The first is Go-Go Loser Ranger, which has an A+ title. This anime is a parody of shows like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, except this time you're rooting for the aliens who are trying to conquer the world, and it's the supposed heroes who are the bad guys. This kind of swap has been done before, but you can tell that the creators of the anime really love those old Super Sentai shows, and the action scenes are pretty fun. I really don't have any issues with the quality of the show. The visuals are nice, and everything seems produced well. I'm just not a big fan of Power Rangers, so the story didn't really grab me. If you're a fan of that kind of show, I would definitely check it out. The second series is Tonari no Yokai-san. This show feels like a pleasant picture book, where humans live in harmony with all kinds of different yokai and mythical creatures. There are a couple of different storylines, one where a girl's looking for her father who's mysteriously disappeared, and another where a cat turns into a yokai, gaining the power of speech in the process. He tries to fit in with the community and come to grips with having a completely new life. The community is extremely kind and accepting of everyone, so if you want to watch a show where the group embraces someone who's going through significant life changes, this might be for you. But I just can't get past the character designs. Look at this. And this. And whatever this is. It's just too silly and simplistic from a design standpoint for me, so I won't be watching the rest of it. But if you can get past that, it might be an enjoyable watch. Also, the cat's kind of annoying. And whoever made this, somebody needs to take away their crayons. The third series is The Grimm Variations. This is a limited release series on Netflix with episodes around 40 minutes each. Each episode takes a look at a classic Grimm Brothers fairy tale, but with a new spin. It's suggested that these tales are being filtered through the mind of Charlotte, their sister, and she has quite the imagination. I loved the first episode, which is a retelling of Cinderella, where the stepsisters are haunted by this relentless, psychotic Cinderella who plays a perfectly innocent girl on the outside while playing psychological mind games with everyone in secret. The second episode, though, I couldn't get very far into. It's very creative, but it revels in some really vicious violence against women that was pretty hard to watch. Now, I watch a lot of shows that have plenty of violence, but that second episode was just unpleasant, so I can't recommend the series. Hopefully, more of the episodes are like the first one. Finally, here's my favorite underrated anime of spring 2024. As a reincarnated aristocrat, I'll use my appraisal skill to rise in the world. I almost didn't watch this show because I don't need another boring, bland isekai in my life. Titles like this aren't novel or funny anymore, they just make it harder for word of mouth to spread if it's good. And that's a shame, because this is the most surprising show of the season for me. I'm just going to call this one Reincarnated Aristocrat from now on. Ars Levent is the 3-year-old son of Raven Levent, the lord of a small village on the fantasy continent of Summerforth. But Ars has a few secrets. Not only is he the reincarnated spirit of a Japanese salaryman, but he has the ability to see people's skills and potentials by looking at them, kind of like peeking into their stats menu in an RPG. There are rumblings of war all over the continent, so Ars knows he needs to surround himself with the most capable people he can find if he and his village are going to survive the coming upheaval. There are a few things that are working in the show's favor. The first is that the protagonist is so young. At first I thought this would be a disadvantage for the series, but the way they've set it up makes it a strength. Since Ars is a reincarnated salaryman who still possesses his old memories, we're dealing with an adult instead of a child. He's never petulant or overly demanding the way a child might be. But this also means that Ars is easily put in danger and has to rely on others more than an adult would have to. This is not one of those isekai with an overpowered protagonist who can destroy everything with his amazing muscles or superior magic. The fact that he's a child also makes it harder for him to recruit people. For each potential recruit, there's always the question of how's he going to convince them to join him in a way that an adult character might not have. Another thing that sets this show apart is that it deals with some surprisingly deep issues. The first episode takes a look at racism in the kingdom, and even Ars' dad fully believes these stereotypes. What I really appreciated about Ars' dad, though, is that once he was shown evidence that his beliefs were mistaken, he was able to make gradual changes to his outlook. Episodes 2 and 3 look at how widespread poverty is in the kingdom, and they even make a connection between poverty and a lack of motivation, showing how poverty can rob talented people of the lives they might have otherwise lived. That's a lot for an isekai fairy tale to handle, but this anime is able to weave in some of those larger issues into its story without feeling like it's trying to pound a message into your head at every moment. Reincarnated Aristocrat sounds horrible on the surface, an isekai with an overly long title starring a 3-year-old boy who can see the stats of people around him as if they were characters in a video game. I wonder if some of the review scores online are being suppressed, because people hear that setup and just automatically downvote it without checking it out. And before I watched it, I would have been right there with them. But now I'm going to be waiting each week to see who Ars is able to recruit next, and how he can pull out the potential from people who might be unaware that they had it in the first place. Hopefully this puts a few under-the-radar anime onto your radar for spring. Feel free to give some recs that I might have missed down in the comments. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.